Hello, and welcome to Bold Opinions on WCCF Tech TV. Video game crunch is bad. Should I just end the video there? I might be risking going over things that we all are perfectly aware of already, but apparently some people haven't gotten the memo. Or at least they don't realise the issues. Michael Gallagher, president of the ESA, who you would think would be more aware of the issues than most people, seems to think that it's not so much of an issue anymore. Recently, Waypoint have been going out of their way, and at E3 2018 they managed to interview a whole bunch of different developers, publishers, and even Michael Gallagher, head of the ESA. And you would think, as the head of the Entertainment Software Association, his finger would be on the pulse, it would be on the buzzer. He knows the industry better than anyone. At least he should, right? Apparently not, apparently not. In the interview, he is asked, I was wondering if you could comment on the current conversation around unionisation and labour organising practices, and if the ESA had any comment at all about, for example, Game Workers Unite and some of those conversations that are starting up. Game Workers Unite is, for those who aren't aware, an organisation that is working towards unionising the entirety of the games industry, making sure developers, marketing people, etc. are not crunched, overworked, underpaid, left out in the cold in any way. Pretty important, really. Gallagher says, so this is fortunately an issue we haven't had to deal with much in my time as a leader at the ESA. I think there's a reason for that. The wages in the video game industry are very high, the barriers to exit for employees are very low, and the opportunities to create within the industry are abundant. There are multiple platforms, multiple publishers, multiple companies spread out all around the company. Which sounds good, right? I mean, most of that is pretty accurate. I mean, there are actually a few other quotes in the article which sort of go against what Mr. Gallagher is actually telling us here. In fact, Raoul Barbet, game director on The Awesome Adventures of Captain Spirit, even says, I think the problem with our industry is that we've got a lot of people who are very passionate, so you can always find someone who wants to work for free for you. And if not, you will say there are hundreds of people like you who will come to my team, so it's easy to profit from that, and to use that too much. So, already, Raoul is acknowledging something that Michael is not acknowledging, that game fans, game designers, they are fans first and foremost. There's a passion they have in order for them to come into the industry. They wouldn't become game designers if they didn't like video games. This is something they want to do. This is something they set out to achieve. And when you see a big studio that you're a big fan of, and they said, if they said to you, hey, come work here for a week just to see how it goes, see if you like it, we won't pay you, it's unlikely many people would say no. The experiences of Raoul and Michael, of course, are going to differ massively, and I think we're going to see exactly where that differs now. Gallagher goes on later in the interview and says, what I hear about that is that yes, where crunch is in effect, there's definite impact, but also I hear more and more publishers saying, and they're doing this for competitive reasons, for culture reasons, they're rejecting crunch and saying, that's not how we operate. And that is an attraction for the best and brightest to see its opportunities and make those individual choices to go to those companies. Which of course sounds wonderful, and I think a lot of publishers are moving away from crunch. They do want to attract the best and brightest in the industry, and therefore they want to make the best possible work environment for those employees. Absolutely makes sense, wonderful. The problem is, apparently, it's the publishers saying that to him. Of course the publishers would say that to him. If it was up to the publishers, everything that was ever said about them would be positive. Everything that's ever said about, if Ubisoft had the choice, oh god, I'm gonna get wrecked over that pronunciation. If Ubisoft had the choice, do you think they would have any negative press around them ever? Of course, of course. If Konami had the choice, do you think we would have heard anything about the Hideo Kojima debacle of him leaving the company? Of course not. If he's hearing things directly from publishers, I'm sorry to say, yeah, it's going to be skewed positive. And unfortunately, if the president of the Entertainment Software Association is only dealing with executives and presidents and publishers and not people on the front lines, the game developers, bug testers, then his view of that is going to be skewed. This is, of course, not the first time we've heard things along these lines. It was only in 2016 when Amy Hennig appeared on the Idle Thumbs Designer Notes podcast. Amy Hennig, of course, being one of the creators of the Uncharted series, previously worked on Legacy of Kain. Amy Hennig is an industry veteran when it comes to being a story writer in video games. There is absolutely no doubt about that, unquestionable. And so when she says of her time in Naughty Dog, keeping in mind Naughty Dog is one of the biggest, most celebrated game studios there are right now, She says, the whole time I was at Naughty Dog, 10.5 years, I probably, on average, I don't know if I ever worked less than 80 hours a week. There are exceptions where it was like, okay, let's take a couple of days off, but I pretty much work 7 days a week, at least 12 hours a day. At least 12 hours a day, 7 days a week? Are you crazy? 10.5 years. For real. And sure, some people might be able to deal with working 12 hours a day. I have no idea what's wrong with those people. But most people can't, for such obvious reasons, and Amy even goes over it herself. She continues on, she says, when asked if making AAA games was worth that kind of lifestyle, she said, I don't think so. There's people who never go home and see their families. They have children who are growing up without seeing them. I didn't have my own kids. I sort of chose my career in lots of ways, and I could be single-minded like that. When I was making sacrifices, did it affect my family? Yes, but it was primarily affecting me, and I could make that choice. When I look at other people, I mean, my health really declined, and I had to take care of myself because it was like bad. But there were people who, you know, collapsed or had to go and check themselves in somewhere when one of these games were done, or they got divorced. That's not okay, any of that. None of this is worth that. And as just said, some people can manage longer hours, longer working hours, and they can deal with that with aplomb. Also in the Waypoint article, they spoke to Andrew Scholdice, designer of Tunic. And Tunic is pretty much a one-man show. There are 2 other people who work on the game in terms of audio and soundtrack, but when it comes to combat design, level design, programming, it is all Andrew Scholdice, my friends. And it also sounds like the man has an interesting way of managing his own time. He says, right, so I feel like I am maybe a little, without bragging, maybe I'm a little bit better at maintaining this balance than other people. Because if it's 9 PM and I'm tired, I'll just decide, you know what, I'm going to be so much better at this tomorrow. 9 PM? 9 PM? Sometimes I'm thinking about bed at 9 PM. I'm certainly not thinking about still working. And it's not just game designers and developers that are suffering from crunch. Even the teams that you might not expect, such as the localization teams, have to work overtime. In an article on Kotaku, Jason Schreier wrote about talking to Jessica Chavez. And in the article it says, in February of 2011, fresh off 9 months of 80-hour work weeks, Jessica Chavez took a pair of scissors to her hair. She'd been working so hard on a video game, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, that she hadn't even a spare hour to go to the barber. As soon as the overtime came to an end, so did 18 inches of hair. It was a retaliation for the headaches the weight of it had given me while working, she'd later tell me. It got so heavy, it was unbearable after a while. She works for Xseed Games, a game localizer. She'll be doing translations and writes and edit text. But 80-hour work weeks, 9 months of it. That sounds like crunch to me. I mean, sure, it was February 2011, we're going back years now. But that's definitely within the last decade, and it definitely sounds damaging and unhealthy, frankly. But not all game developers and designers are lucky enough to get the choice. In an article with Game Informer, oh my god, I'm going to mispronounce this, Krzysztof Nosek, I have no idea how wrong I got that, and it actually scares me. The article reads, due to some unlucky business negotiations with publisher Ubisoft, Techland hadn't been given enough time to finish the game, Call of Juarez the Cartel. With a release date looming and far too much work left to complete, the team turned to one of the video game industry's most notorious practices, crunch. We all had the enthusiasm and drive to create a good game, but there simply weren't enough hours around the clock to fit everything in, Nosek says. Out of exhaustion, we're making stupid mistakes, which required even more patching later on. We would lose our tempers easily, and at some point we developed a pretty surrealistic attitude to the project as a whole. It doesn't sound to me like that development cycle was healthy, and it doesn't sound to me like that development cycle improved the game. If anything, overworked staff, overworked employees had a lot of stress and a lot of dissatisfaction, and things can only get worse when you're peer pressured or in a culture of crunch. Nosek goes on. The atmosphere was that all hands must be on deck, since it would be a hit to team morale if some people didn't sit and crunch while all of us did. Personally, I can somewhat relate to a culture of overworking. In my old office job, we clocked off at 5:30, and that's good because we were paid from 9 till 5:30. And so when Half-Life rolled around, we'd leave and go home. But it was frowned upon to go home when you start working, because they just sort of expected everyone to be working for at least another 5, 10, 15 minutes. In fact, I had a friend who also worked there at the time who told me, "Why'd you just walk out at 5:30? Because I'm done." But it doesn't make you look good. It doesn't make you look like you want to work. Well, looking like I want to work should be getting there on time. Like, not staying over. They even told us we weren't going to get paid overtime if we stayed there for 15 minutes, so why should I? Corporate culture's bad. Office culture is bad. You can get peer pressured into things like working more than you should just by the mentality that other people have. Whether or not that's good for you, whether or not that's healthy or even in your benefit in any way is another thing. Usually it only benefits the company and not the employee. And forget companies, they suck. So with that in mind, what is the answer to crunch culture? Don't do it. Is the short answer? Is the don't do the crunch. Don't. Of course, it's easy for me to say that. I don't work in the games industry. I don't have to deal with all these deadlines and intense situations. I don't have to deal with publishing negotiations. However, it is most definitely a fact that it causes people stress. But what's most definitely clear is that extended periods of crunch, months at a time, or even years in Amy Hennig's case, I have no idea how she managed that. That's not good for someone. That's not going to foster a good corporate culture. That's not going to make employees happy. It's not going to make the best product in the end, I don't believe. It's not going to make the world's best game. Hell, it could improve things. Games could get polished, games could get sharpened, but then, as shown in Call of Juarez, the cartel, sometimes things go incredibly wrong. Hopefully, we're moving towards a period now where crunch is a thing of the past. However, I get the feeling that when it does happen, publishers and even game developers are just having to be more quiet about it than ever. Thank you for watching Bold Opinions. If you did like the video, then please leave a like in the like votey thing below and comment saying something nice. That'd be good. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.